Why can't I see you now?
Hello, Namaste. I'm Ira Sahai back again with another D Life podcast video. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of D Life and a certified metabolic health consultant. Most of you know, but for those who don't know, the laurels of D Life are the gold standard of global low carb. And just a bit of introduction on the world's biggest ecosystem of low carb course and certification community, consultancy, and low carb resources. So Indian low carb, as we see it today, was pioneered by a silver medalist engineer from IIT Roorkee and a maverick Anup Singh in 2011. This is the first online evidence that exists of 100 gram carbs per day max is only of Anup in the world. He gave the template of 20-20-60 or 100 gram carbs per day max based on the liver's glycogen holding capacity. That made low carb diet and disease reversal possible for even Indian vegetarians. 100 gram carbs per day max has now become the gold standard of global low carb. The course Low Carb Nutrition and Metabolic Health, written by Anup, is the only course in this space from India with NSDC partner certification. With the certificate can be pulled into the government's DigiLocker, which makes it a very, very credible certificate and the only one in this space. It's also the biggest course in the world with 144 CPD hours that no other course has. So essentially, D-Life course, community, consultancy, and the diploma course are the biggest in the world. D-Life is now also into consultancy with very interesting and serious money refund guarantee on many chronic diseases, and we are very serious about what we do on the back of hundreds of documented case studies and success stories on D-Life Forum. This is what we do, and we offer money back guarantee on a lot of chronic diseases reversal. So if you wish to reverse diabetes, PCOS, hypertension, fatty liver, and more, get in touch with us on the given number in the show notes below or book a discovery call at www.dlifehealthcare.com. So now back to the podcast. Special occasions deserve special podcast, and we are here today in another episode of the D Life podcast series, bringing to you my friend and colleague Karan Sarin, a D Life member and a D Life certified metabolic health coach or consultant, and also the author of the book Sick Nation, that's already making waves with its great sales. Karan's intro, as he has sent me, and I've just cut pasted that right now, 2 minutes back, is I have been in the tech startup world for longest time as a founder and executive at some other companies. Proud D-Life certified coach, popularly known as Sweet Reactions on Insta, and a brand new author. Karan, welcome. With so much, so many feathers in your cap now. We've already been a fan of yours, seeing your Insta reels, and very, very great learning there. Even for a layman who can just watch those reels and know what foods put up the blood sugar and what foods, do not impact the blood sugar at all, or impact them very minimally. So tell us, what were the driving forces that made you take the plunge into being a health and wellness author first up? You being the second from D-Life stable itself, the first being Mandar who wrote, Adunik Basmasul, that also became a bestseller, and now it's your book doing the same. So please tell us what were the driving forces behind this book?
Thank you, Ira. Thanks for a very kind introduction. Look, I did not get into health because of my interest. I actually got into health because of a fear. Back in 2022, my father, he unfortunately had a very massive cardiac arrest, and he was actually doctors were able to revive him on the third CPR and defib attempt. However, as a side effect of that cardiac arrest, he developed hypoxic brain injury. And it's been 3 years that we have been dealing with this condition. And for those who know, I mean, a hypoxic brain injury can be quite dangerous because when you have a cardiac arrest, then your heart stops beating, and your heart is not sending the raw material to your brain. Typically, which is oxygen and glucose, and your brain cells tend start to die. And once they are dead, they're basically dead. You can't revive them, and unfortunately, you start losing a lot of brain functions. And something similar happened with my father 3 years ago, and and we are still struggling with it till this date. So that was really the pivotal point in my life, I would say, when I started thinking about health. I was 40 at that point of time, and I was living carefree like any other 40-year-old. Like undefeated and life is not going to change. But that's when I realized that what seems to be healthy on paper or in appearance doesn't actually mean that you're healthy. And looking at my father's life, he was in my opinion, he was one of the healthiest people I knew. I mean, he was very fit, and he had been working. He started his business about 30, 40 years ago, and he was very hardworking guy, and he was always eating ghar ka khana. He was going for his morning walks. So, I mean, in my opinion, he was healthy, but yet we found ourselves suddenly in a situation where we had a cardiac arrest without warning. So something didn't sit very well with me. And the luck would have it that 6 months later, my cousin brother-in-law, he was 49 years old, and he actually passed away because of a cardiac arrest. But the underlying condition that he had was a fatty liver disease that he had been struggling with for 5 years. So these incidents in my life made me think about health very seriously. And again, my brother, he was living seemingly healthy life. He was also eating ghar ka khana, and he was young and active. So it didn't really the math didn't add up for me, that why this is happening. And that's when I started going deeper, and I started to become more inquisitive. I started learning, and around that time is where I also discovered the D Life course. And I actually enrolled myself in, not because I at that time had an ambition to become a coach, but I wanted to just learn about metabolic health. And I went through this journey with D Life's very extensive course for about 9 months or so, and eventually got certified. And while I was going through this course, I learned so much about metabolic health. I learned so much about metabolic disorders, nutrition, exercise physiology, and I started experimenting on my own. And I started experimenting with all the things that I could, with my sleep, with my blood glucose monitoring. I started wearing a CGM patch, even though I was not diabetic. And I learned so much about my own physiology. And at one point, I decided that I'm going to share that with the world. And I started putting my food experiments on Instagram, and that became quite popular. A lot of people started following me, and one thing led to the other. And all of this basically led me to my book, which I have now just released in India, across India on 18th of December. The title of the book is called Sick Nation. Actually, I have it here with me. This book basically is the culmination of all my research that I've done, all the studies that I've done with D Life, and also all the experimentation that I've done. I believe India is going through a metabolic epidemic right now, and we don't talk enough about it. It is a really massive problem, and this book is my attempt to bring light to this epidemic, and and talk about, first of all, why it's happening, why we find ourselves in a position where we are the diabetes capital of the world, where 27% of our deaths are coming from a cardiovascular event. So what led us here? What's the role of our epigenetics? What's the role of our lifestyle? And then hopefully provide a solution. And that solution can only come through lifestyle changes, not through medicines and stuff. So that's what this book is all about, and that's what led me to this.
Yeah, it's great to know these insights, and very shocking fact that you mentioned fatty liver, and that your brother passed away from that. So, and he had been having fatty liver since 4 5 years. I mean, this is very shocking. And let me tell you a great data, Karan. I think 64% of people who go for liver transplant begin with fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Exactly.
And there is no pharmacological solution to fatty liver except a dietary intervention and a low carb diet that's going to reverse it. And you are in the community of D Life, and you see that we have claimed a money back guarantee on fatty liver reversal, non alcoholic fatty liver reversal. So I don't know why this misinformation and loss of innocent lives, just because it's a pharma driven, I would say, sick care industry, because people who have lost their dear ones would feel that way. And what do you think of this entire scenario? Because he didn't have to go this way, Karan. Now that you've done the course, so much better about fatty liver disease and reversal and all of that. How do you see that impact on your life? And how do you see that entire situation that happened? Because this fatty liver is completely reversible.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a multifold problem. But if I have to pick the top reasons, I feel, first of all, like you said, uh, our medical industry is designed to treat diseases, not prevent it. So we have to understand that. And unfortunately, the biggest problem with this disorder, fatty liver disease, is that for the it's not that you suddenly develop fatty liver. It's a progression, right? It's a progression of anywhere from 5 to 10 years, right? And it varies from person to person, but it's a long progression. And the problem is that way we diagnose this is not ideal. It's not made for prevention. We are looking for liver enzymes in most of the cases. Doctors even are relying on blood test, liver enzyme plus blood test. But those are the late stage markers. You're not going to find elevated levels of liver enzymes in the early stage of the disease. So unfortunately, this disease goes undiagnosed for a very long time, and then there are not like too many symptoms of it unless you're monitoring it, or unless you feel it. So the biggest problem is that it goes undiagnosed for a very long time. That, in my opinion, is the number one flaw in the way our system is set up. Secondly, I think the standard advice, even if you are diagnosed with this condition, if you go to the doctors, the standard advice would always be to cut calories, or cut calories, eat less, walk more, lose some
Cut
weight.
down fat.
Yeah, exactly. And if you actually look at the scientific research, it says the opposite of it. It's not about cutting calories, it's about cutting down the right calories. So you can add, and when we say right calories, it's and you probably know this, the relationship between insulin resistance and fatty liver is very close one. And when
Correct.
you are in an elevated state of insulin, all the carbohydrates that you're consuming, roughly 25 to 30% of it is getting converted into fat and as fat droplets and stored in your liver, in your organ. And there is research pointing that. So it's cutting calories only is not the solution. You have to cut the right calories if you want to reverse the course of this disorder. And unfortunately, that's not the advice that what most people would get. Most people would be told to just simply cut calories, eat less, walk more. And I don't think that that advice has worked for anyone ever.
Yeah, and I just one question on the impact itself. I mean, the fact that your brother was diagnosed with fatty liver grade one initially, I am assuming. And what was the treatment or what was the advice from the doctor given, for 4 to 5 years till he landed in this, place? Sorry for you.
He was overweight, so the typical advice that he got was that you need to lose weight, basically. Yeah,
Mm.
lose weight, eat less, move more. That was the typical advice. Uh, and I think, and like I said, I think that's the worst thing that you could do, right? And it's first of all, it's very hard to do. If someone who's obese, if you ask them to just eat less, that's most likely not going to happen, right? So losing weight is far more complicated than calorie in, calorie out. So there is a hormonal model of weight loss, and especially with people who are obese, they tend to be leptin resistant, right? And their brain doesn't know that they're full and they're going to eat, and that's why it's very hard to cut calories. So the standard advice is not it did not serve him well. And also research points that if you have fatty liver, the chances of a cardiovascular event go multifold up, simply because of the inflammation that that fatty liver is sending across your body. And that's actually a defense mechanism of the body. It's actually trying to give you signals by releasing this inflammation that, hey, something is wrong here, please do something. And that inflammation, if nothing is done for too long, then it has a very deep impact on your arteries and your cardiovascular health. And the chances of having a cardiovascular event goes multifold high, which unfortunately is what ended up happening in his case.
Yeah, investigating insulin is never in the paradigm of the medical protocols, and nobody checks that. And this is where people are landing. And let me make one very brief point. Even people who do not have any visible weight or belly fat can have grade two fatty liver on ghar ka khana. And we have so many
100%.
cases of this. In the D life itself, my success stories, and of a 16-year-old who's absolutely lean, no weight to lose, no visible fat, no belly fat, of course, nothing. And she had grade 2 fatty liver. Of course, we reversed that in 60 days. That's another story. But It's very impactful, such real life stories, and the one that Karan shared. This is how people get motivated, inspired, impacted to change some things around them. Karan, I know your book is centered around the most critical health parameters that mainstream has been busy ignoring. For example, as you said, fatty liver progressing into a stage where, he passed away, or fasting insulin never been checked. Can you highlight this a bit more as you've put it in your book, and what was the thought behind, putting it all together?
Yeah. Look, like I said, our medical industry is very busy treating the disease. It's not made to prevent the diseases, and that's why if you look even in our annual reports or annual checkups, the markers that are typically measured are the late stage markers. For example, we are obsessed with monitoring fasting blood glucose levels or HbA1c. Uh, and the fact is that these are late stage markers. By the time your blood glucose levels or HbA1c goes up, you basically have 10 to 15 years of undiagnosed insulin resistance. So and it's very unfortunate that that we are obsessed with these late stage markers, especially in a country like India, where we are already diabetes capital of the world, and there are more pre-diabetics than diabetics, and it's not getting any better. If and this is going to have a massive economic burden on our country in a couple of decades, if nothing is done. There is already a study out there that predicts that by if nothing changes, then by 2050 India will have 450 million obese people. So we have to understand that that we have to shift our thinking from reacting to being proactive. So we have to think about preventative health, right? And what that means is that we also need to change our thinking around how we diagnose diseases. We need to, instead of focusing on the late stage markers like blood glucose and HbA1c, we need to look at early stage markers. And the research would point that the best early stage marker is to check for insulin resistance, right? Because insulin resistance is what precedes pre-diabetes or diabetes. And this progression, by the way, is super long. It's not that it happens overnight. It takes anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So we have a good decade to actually to prevent a lot of these disorders. But it's just that we are fixated with looking at the wrong things, and there are various reasons why we are obsessed with looking at the wrong things. But insulin is definitely a hero hormone, as you would know, and as most people would call it. It has massive impact on pretty much every cell in our body. And of course, its most famous function is to bring the blood sugar down. And our body has a very sophisticated mechanism to keep our blood sugar in a very narrow range, and for good reasons, because high blood sugar is toxic in our body, and low blood sugar is also very lethal. You could go into seizures or in coma if the blood sugar goes down. So our body tries super hard to keep our blood sugar in a very narrow range, and the way it does that is through insulin, which is a hormone that is produced by our pancreas. Every time we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar levels, they tend to go up. And because high blood sugar levels can be toxic, our pancreas release insulin to bring the blood sugar levels down. Now, normally, once the insulin has taken care of the blood sugar levels in our bloodstream, it is supposed to come down. But we are today living in a world where our insulin levels are chronically elevated because of our food habits, because of our various reasons, also lack of activity and stuff like that. If you look at any normal routine of an average person, we get up in the morning in a fasted state, and we straight away jump into eating a very sugary, carbohydrate rich breakfast. It could be cereal or paratha or rice or idli made with rice, whatever. It's simple carbohydrates, actually processed carbohydrates that immediately convert into glucose in your body. So our pancreas have to release insulin to take care of that glucose dump that we have put in our body early in the morning. And typically, in a normal person, that takes about 2 hours for that glucose to come down, and insulin would stay out for a little bit longer to make sure that nothing is left. And right when it is supposed to come down, we put more glucose in our body. So mid morning we're going to have a snack, or we're going to have a chai with sugar, or a rusk or biscuit or whatever. Again, simple sugar that will not allow our insulin to come down, but now our pancreas have to produce even more, and it stays elevated, right? And then a couple of hours later, we find ourselves in to be having a lunch, which is again very carbohydrate rich, heavy, rich lunch. Let's say, I don't know, rajma chawal or something like that. And then, and insulin is still elevated, but now we have kept it. Now we have pushed it even higher. And then, a couple of hours later in the evening, we're going to have a snack, which is going to be a samosa, which is basically a carbohydrate on a carb on carb. And now your glucose levels are again elevated, and insulin stays up. And then we find ourselves eating, again a carbohydrate rich dinner. And by the way, this is not what I'm describing is not abnormal. I mean, if you look at the recent research from ICMR, it says that 70% of our calories are of our calories comes from carbohydrates. So this is not an abnormal case. This is the normal case. So basically, we are our insulin levels are chronically high, which leads to hyperinsulinemia, and then we repeat this day in day after, which means that we are now in a hyperinsulinemic state for a very long time, and that is what turns our cells to become resistant to insulin's effect. And this progression, this is the starting, but then our body is designed in such a way where it has a lot of compensatory mechanisms, and for the first couple of years our pancreas sense that our glucose levels are not coming down, so it produces even more insulin to bring that glucose levels down, right? And that works beautifully for the first 5-7 years, but then eventually your pancreas are going to give up. Your beta cells are going to give up, and you're going to develop beta cell dysfunction, and that's when the blood sugar levels, it will be harder for the body to maintain the normal blood sugar levels, and that's when the blood sugar levels will start to go up. And now you are anywhere from 7 to 10 year time frame, and all this while your blood sugar levels were normal because your pancreas are producing more and more insulin, and no one checked for insulin. Your doctor was only ordering a fasting blood sugar and HbA1c, and of course that was normal because your pancreas are doing super hard work to keep that in check. But now after 7 to 10 years, once the dysfunction at the beta cell level is happening, your glucose levels will start to go up, and that is when for the first time your blood sugar levels, fasting blood sugar levels, will be above 100, and that's when a doctor would declare you to be pre-diabetic. And even at that point of time, the advice that you would get would be eat less, move more, or something very standard, right? They're not going to tell you exactly what calories to cut. So, you basically go back and you keep on living the lifestyle that you have been living. And another 5 years goes and beta cell dysfunction deepens and deepens. And now, you have lost a lot of your beta cells. And now your body is really struggling to maintain the glucose levels in your body, and finally your glucose levels are high. And that's when you will go for your blood test, and you will find that your fasting glucose is above 125 milligrams, and that's when you are declared diabetic. So if you see, the progression is pretty long, and for that first 10 years we were looking at the wrong markers. Instead of looking at our insulin levels in the body, we were checking for glucose levels at HbA1c, which were kept low. And now suddenly, our body is not able to manage it, and we find ourselves to be in a diabetic state. So that's the state of affairs, unfortunately.
Yes, and it took ICMR so many years to admit this, which Anup has been saying since 2011. Why 100-gram carbs matters, and there was nobody, forget India, in the world that gave out that number actually based on the liver's glycogen holding capacity. So, as you said, the pancreas is redlining to control A1C or blood sugar. It's like driving your car at 100 kilometers per hour in third gear, as Anup says. So
Yeah.
this is the long story short. 100-gram carbs we have been talking about since 2011 on D-Life Forum, I think 2014. That is the mantra now, which is the gold standard of low carb nutrition. Karan, I think I see your entire profile as a disruptor where you are putting out videos every day, to debunk the popular myths. So, every video that you put out, it's a statement against the balanced diet myth. How do you see that balanced diet myth, and what responsible for getting India here?
Yeah. Look, balanced diet is a I strongly believe is a myth. All the dietitians out there or nutritionists who say, eat balanced, I think they have no idea what they're talking about, because actually I will answer this question with absolute proof. So the same ICMR study that we are referring to right now, in that study, they did a small experiment. What they did was they tried to replace refined carbohydrates with the so-called whole grain carbohydrates. And they found that so whole grain carbohydrates like whole wheat or millets, and they found that it had zero impact on reducing zero impact or positive impact on reducing or on improving the metabolic dysfunction. So what that tells you is that replacing one grain with another is not the solution. And in that same study, what they did was that they actually replaced only 5% of carbohydrates with protein. And that had a profound impact. And if I remember my numbers correctly, I think the risk of diabetes came down by like 18% or so. And that is just very minute 5% reduction in carbohydrates replaced with protein.
Yeah.
So what that should tell you is that, all those dietitians and nutritionists out there who are telling you that, hey, eat zero maida bread, or have a balanced diet where have whole meat, emmer wheat, or amaranth flour, or kapli, or whatever. I'm sorry, the data and the science is absolutely opposite of what this is. So the, I have a very simple rule when it comes to nutrition, and that's something that I've also mentioned in my book. I have a full protocol, and my rule is that you have to control your carbohydrates. There is no other way around it. You have to bring your carbohydrates down. You so that's number one rule. The second rule is that you control carbohydrates, don't fear fats, and prioritize protein. That's a very simple rule of nutrition. uh, it's not balanced. It's not balanced. You have to prioritize protein in your diet. Don't fear fats. In fact, incorporate good fats, because if you're going to cut down on your carbohydrates, you need an alternate fuel source. And good fats can be an excellent fuel source for your body. So don't fear fats. We have been through decades of fat phobia, and unfoundly, it's completely unfounded and unscientific, which has led us to over consuming sugar and carbohydrates, basically.
Yeah. Well, in a world where everybody's trying, to push out nutrition data, not data, but I think myths, I would call them myths. You've already busted a lot of myths in terms of which foods raise or put up the blood sugar. Now, in this book, I'm sure that learning or that data has itself been incorporated. What else can readers and viewers of this podcast expect to read in that book or find new that is not available, largely anywhere?
Yeah. Look, one thing that we haven't talked about enough is the role of our genes or epigenetics. We Indians are predisposed to have metabolic dysfunction at a much lower weight, BMI, much lower age. So, and that has a profound impact. We don't talk enough about it. Now, of course, we cannot change and there is a very good reason. It's an evolutionary reason that our epigenetics changed, for to hoard more fat, and that basically was a survival mechanism for us during famines. But now we find ourselves in abundance, and those epigenetics are basically turned against us. And I've tried my best to actually explain that with a lot of science and research in my book. So the role of epigenetics is profound. But like I like to say that genes only load the gun. Your lifestyle pulls the trigger.
Correct.
And even though we are predisposed, I think it's good to know that we are predisposed to have metabolic dysfunction at a lower weight, lower BMI, lower age. But that doesn't mean that we are doomed. What that means is that we need to be more conscious of our lifestyle and work a little bit extra hard to stay metabolically healthy. And that's the later part of my book, where I focused on the lifestyle, and again, research, data backed, scientifically proven protocols. And in my book, I call it a big rocks principle. So basically, I have there are multiple things that you can do to improve your lifestyle that will have good impact on your metabolic health. But the research points that there are three main things, and I call them three big rocks. So imagine that you have a glass jar in front of you, and you need to fill that with big rocks, small rocks, and sand. This is a time management principle, actually. So if you end up filling that jar with small rocks and sand first, then you will be left with no place to place the big rocks. So the better approach is that you place the big rocks first, and then let the sand naturally settle around the big rocks. So what are the three big rocks of metabolic health? Nutrition, of course, your activity, exercise, and your sleep and stress response, basically. If you are able to manage these three things you will have a profound positive impact on your metabolic health. And of course, there are, smaller rocks and pebbles, but those things will naturally settle if you take care of these three big rocks. So I have spent a lot of time in my book trying to bring forward the research on these three fronts: the effect of proper nutrition, the effect of activity and exercise, and the effect of managing stress and sleep on metabolic health, which is something that you will find in the book.
Yeah, I think, and you writing a book is even more credible because now Karan is also a certified metabolic health consultant, which means he knows exactly the principles of metabolic health, not just generic diet and nutrition, metabolic health as in all parameters taken into account, everything taken into account, including insulin and its impact. So he is, I think the book has a lot of credibility because it comes from him, and he's a certified metabolic health consultant, and who he has also incorporated the insights from his own CGM testing and all that data. So I think even a layman can learn a lot from the book itself and do practical things that he has suggested or take into account things that he wants you to acknowledge and take into account and improve your metabolic health. So, Karan, how is the book doing right now? How are the sales? And, I'm so proud to say this every time that I say this, I'm so proud of it. How are the sales doing? How has the book been received? And tell us, you've been traveling to cities and you've been meeting people. What is the response to the book?
Actually, I'm more than grateful for the response that we are receiving for the book. Actually, the moment we launched the book, it was number one in its category on Amazon. So I think sales wise, it's doing pretty decent. But I think more importantly, it has received a lot of love from people like you, and also from medical industry. I've been very fortunate to get endorsements from very prominent doctors like Dr. V. Mohan. He's a Padam Shri and India's number one diabetologist. Dr. Chittaranjan Yajanik, who was the who pioneered the Indian thin fat phenotype research. Dr. Eric Berg, and many other doctors actually. So I've been extremely fortunate to get support from the medical industry, from top notch doctors who are very forward looking people and who understand that India is right now in its is going through this epidemic, and it is only going to get worse in the next couple of decades if nothing is done. So they want to they want the system to change and think proactively and preventatively rather than being reactionary. So I've been very fortunate, to get their endorsements, and I think the biggest accomplishment has been the love that I've received from people. I have a fairly large community on Instagram, and a lot of those people have now read the book, and I'm getting a lot of messages which I try to repost on Instagram so that it gets shared. But I'm getting very heartfelt messages from a lot of people, personal stories, and how they connect with the with what I've mentioned in the book. So I think that for me has been the biggest accomplishment, if I would say.
Yeah. So we'll ask Karan to read an excerpt from his book, but we'll come back to that later. The second part of Karan's profile is another feather in his cap, and that's him getting certified as a metabolic health consultant from D Life. Let us get into that chapter of his life. I remember talking to Karan last year, and we had a long chat, and quite a hilarious one at that. And Karan enrolled into the course, and he completed the course. He's now a certified metabolic health consultant or coach from D Life. So Karan, tell us, why did you choose D Life? Why did you first of all think of getting certified, and why D Life?
Yeah, actually, we are now in 2026, so it's been 2 years now, but
Yeah,
uh,
correct.
last year. But I also very distinctly remember our first conversation. And look, like I said, I did not get into health because I had an interest. I literally got into health because of fear. I had seen those unfortunate incidents in my family with my father and with my brother-in-law, and I was curious to understand why this happened to them, first of all. And for me, they had a pretty good lifestyle. They were, like I said, eating ghar ka khana most of the time, doing morning walks and stuff like that. So I was a bit baffled, and I didn't really understand, why would these men go through, why would this happen to them, basically. And these are all metabolic disorders, right? It's a cluster of problem, pre-diabetes, diabetes, fatty liver, obesity, your neurodegenerative disorders, cardiovascular events, reproductive or fertility related issues, right? This is all a cluster of metabolic disorders, right? It's and the underlying dysfunction is insulin resistance. That's the common denominator among all of these disorders, and it might manifest differently in different people, but it's undeniably the common denominator is insulin resistance, right? So the reason, first of all, I got interested is because I was curious and I wanted to understand why this is happening, and I wanted to improve my own health. And when I spoke to you first, at that point of time, coaching was never on my mind, and even right now, I don't, I don't like, I'm not super aggressively coaching because my focus is mostly, I believe I can have a bigger impact in creating awareness, because I feel that in a country like India, there is a lack of awareness, and that is what I'm trying to do with the work that I do on Instagram or through my book, because I believe creating awareness would have a bigger impact. So that's where I spend most of my energies. uh, but to go back to that conversation, at that time I was trying to understand. I don't have a medical degree or anything, so I wanted to understand how can I learn more about this metabolic these metabolic conditions, why they're happening, how to prevent and stuff like that. And I actually looked at various courses. One of the courses I looked at was actually a course that was offered by Harvard, and I don't want to name it, but basically I looked at that, and I spent a lot of time with those people, and I felt that the course material was very shallow in my opinion as compared to what I found, D Life's course material. I think ultimately, then obviously I ended up working with you guys and becoming certified through D Life. What I think really was very impressive for me was the depth of knowledge on all areas, not just one area, but the depth of knowledge was very extensive, on all fronts, whether it is, I remember one of the first chapters was, it started, 1.8 million years ago when we were hunter gatherers. So it was, Anup has done a brilliant job of, starting, going back, that long, and trying to explain how the human evolution has happened and how that has impacted our metabolic health, or the changes in our metabolic health. So very well researched, and a lot of depth in the course material is what ultimately made up I made up a mind that I'm going to do this course basically. And like I said, I've been extremely happy, and I learned a lot. I think this course has played a very pivotal role in writing of this book, because I've been on a low carb diet since last 2 years or so, and for me this is normal. This is now my lifestyle, and I think this is the way of living, actually, if you ask me. So a lot of the learnings, a lot of the learnings came from the course, and as I went through it, I adapted my own lifestyle. Whether it's nutrition, whether it's exercise, there is a lot about there's a lot of depth around exercise physiology. I started doing strength training myself, 1.5 years ago, and now that is my if I miss my strength training session even a single day, I feel very abnormal. It's become a second nature to me now. So a lot of learnings were actually came from the course directly, and I have tried to distill some of that in my book, along with my personal experiences and the research that I've done outside, and also the all the experimentation that I've done basically.
Yeah, so I'm sure, I mean, as for all of us, it's an amazing experience just going through the D-Life course and the community and the forum and the recipes and the success stories. You know, with the biggest resource of low carb in the world, whether it's in terms of case studies and how they were handled, how things were reversed, and supplements or meal plans, or it's a whole world of low carb resource material and everything low carb. But Karan, also tell us how was your experience of the forum of the mentors, the group that you're in? It's a mad, crazy group, and they keep talking all the time about low carb and what to do, what not to do. So the forum is buzzing in itself. The WhatsApp group is buzzing, another place, and there are batches, and the mentors are interacting everywhere. It's a crazy house. What do you think of the support, the mentors, the entire experience with D-Live?
After 2 days of joining the WhatsApp group, I had to put it on mute because it is buzzing all the time. But that's a great thing, right? I mean, you are in the midst of like-minded people who are on a similar journey or a similar mission, and I think it's a great opportunity to interact with them. Forum also, there are a lot of case studies there, and a lot of people putting their own, sometimes putting their own blood work, reports and analyzing them. So I think what you guys have built, other than the course, is perhaps far more valuable than the course itself, because then it's a lived experience. You are among a community where you are discussing and where you are looking at the live case studies and interacting with like-minded people. And a lot of you guys have so much experience, helping so many people with metabolic disorders. So. Uh, for someone like me who was new to this, to hear from you or Anoop or other members on your experiences with the people who you are supporting and helping is a vicarious way of living and learning, basically. So I think forum and WhatsApp group are in my opinion as important as the course itself, and I think it provides a very well-rounded finish to it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, coming back to the book itself, Karan, is there anything, an excerpt or something that you would want to read out to the audiences that will probably make them understand as a crux of the book? I know it's a very, small paragraph, at the end of the day, but even then, would you want to read out something to them?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Maybe I can quickly read the conclusion
Yes.
section of my book. I think that might be a good overall summary, and I think that will give a good picture. If that makes sense. Okay, so this is the conclusion section. So we began this journey with a phone call from an emergency room, a moment of crisis that revealed a lifetime of hidden damage. We ended here, armed with the knowledge that can prevent that call from ever being made. The story of India's metabolic decline is not one of personal failure, but of a tragic mismatch. Our ancient genes, brilliantly designed for survival in times of scarcity, are now colliding with a modern world of abundance and convenience. The result is a silent epidemic of insulin resistance that manifests as heart disease, diabetes, fatty liver, and other chronic illnesses that are cutting short the lives of our loved ones. But this story does not have to end in tragedy. As we have discovered, metabolic dysfunction is not an inevitability. It is a process that can be halted and, in many cases, reversed. The power to do so lies not in magic pill or a complex medical procedure, but in the three foundational pillars of health that are within your control: the food you eat, the way you move your body, and the priority you give to sleep and stress management. The playbook in the final chapter is not an endpoint, it is your beginning. It is a roadmap to transform your understanding into action, to make choices that lower your insulin, build your strength, and restore your body's natural resilience. It is the system I used to pull myself back from the same metabolic cliff my father and brother in law went over. This is not just a story of survival, but of transformation and hope. My father survived his cardiac arrest, but his life and ours were irrecoverably changed. My brother in law was not as fortunate. I cannot change their stories, but by sharing what I have learned from their loss, I hope to help you change yours. Look at your family, look at your children. The choices you make today are the epigenetic inheritance you pass on to them. By breaking the cycle of metabolic dysfunction in your own life, you are creating a legacy of health for generations to come. This is how we heal a nation: one person, one family, one metabolically aware community at a time. You have the knowledge, you understand the stakes. The path forward is not about perfection, but about progress. Start today. Your future self will thank you for it. The end of this book is not a finish line, it is your starting block. This journey is powerful, but it doesn't have to be a solitary one. Join our growing community where the conversation continues every day. I share my latest experiments, answer questions, and feature the stories of people just like you, who are taking back control of their health. Find us on Instagram at Sweet Reactions and share your own journey using the hashtag SickNation. Let's heal our nation together.
Yeah, I think the book, beautifully written, Karan. I've just started reading the book, although I've read it already in bits and pieces, but the signed copy that you gave me, I've started reading it. And, I didn't want to, rush through the book. So I'm taking my time to read it and understand every chapter. But I think it is pure empowerment for people who want to learn about metabolic health, who want to learn about the parameters, who want to learn, a layman, how we have been impacted by the loss of our near and dear ones, or their health deteriorating, and nobody has a clue. So here is a book, here is an Instagram page that is giving you good direction and where to start, what to do, and what to in that process, what can you avoid being pulled into by accident. So I think Karan's book Sick Nation is a great resource for everybody to get it. Karan, can they get it from Amazon directly?
Yeah. The book is available in India, across India on Amazon. I think that's the most easiest way to get it. It's also there on. You will also find the book in the bookstores or at airport bookstores. But I think the easiest way is to go to the Amazon. To go to Amazon.
Yeah, so you can book your copies and buy your copies from Amazon directly. The book is called Sick Nation. And also follow Karan on Instagram, Sweet Reactions. That's his sweet handle, just like his smile. But Karan, one more thing. I mean, what would you say to a metabolically sick India? Because your book is about that. Five things, probably that, you want to give as a tip to Indians in terms of nutrition, in terms of the habits that they can inculcate or drop, to change the metabolic health crisis of India.
Uh, Look, I have described the exact protocols in my book, but if I have to give you a digest, I will maybe quickly walk you through all the three main pillars that I mentioned before. I've already talked about nutrition, but I think I will repeat it again because it's very important to understand this. Nutrition is one of your biggest levers simply because an average person is eating anywhere from 3 to 6 times in a day, right? So the frequency is very high, and secondly, the food that you eat has a direct impact on your insulin levels. So it's very direct in that sense. So food has a profound impact on your metabolic health. And like I've just said before, and I'm going to repeat it now, the simple rule is that you need to control your carbohydrates. You should not fear fats. In fact, you should incorporate good fats in your diet, and please prioritize protein. That's a simple rule. If you're able to take care of these three things, I'm also a big advocate and fan of fasting. I think fasting is a great way to also reset your insulin levels, because when you don't eat for a prolonged time, then your body, your glucose levels come down and your insulin levels come down. So, but again, that's the fourth pillar of nutrition in my book. But I would say get the first three right, and if you are able to get that right, then then fasting is the advanced level of it. So that's the takeaway for nutrition. Then activity has a very profound impact again on your insulin sensitivity. There is my personal experience mentioned in the book, but there is also a research that I've cited in the book, which actually found that a simple hack like a 20-minute walk after your meal can actually lower your blood sugar level by up to 20%. That's like a medicine. It's a great way to stay insulin sensitivity. So if there is nothing else that you can do, the least that you can do is that you can go for a 20-minute walk after your meals, and that will have a profound impact on keeping you on managing your blood sugar levels, but also keeping you insulin sensitive. If you want to optimize, then the research suggests that adding strength training to your routine can have an even bigger impact, because when you strength train, you have multiple advantages. I mean, but the two direct consequences of that of strength training is that, one, you're depleting the glycogen stores in your muscles, and your muscle is the biggest glucose sink in your body. So 70% of our running glucose in our bloodstream is absorbed by our muscle tissue. So you are basically, when you strength train, you're depleting the glycogen stores, so your muscles have now free capacity to absorb more glucose. And secondly, you if when you strength train, you also increase your muscle mass. So now you're also increasing the sink, it's the size of the sink. So strength training has a profound impact on keeping you insulin sensitive, I believe. So that's what the research points. And lastly, the third pillar is sleep and stress. And sleep and stress have a very bi-directional relationship. We unfortunately find ourselves in an environment where we are chronically stressed. Our HPA axis is stuck, and that is constantly producing cortisol. And cortisol has, it directly opposes the effect of insulin. So insulin wants to bring the blood sugar down, but cortisol wants to bring the blood glucose up. It's a survival mechanism again, right? So being in a chronically stressed state has will make you insulin resistant, and that has a very very profound impact. So I have exact protocols mentioned on how you can manage chronic or acute stress and keep that in check. But one of the best ways to also keep your stress levels in check is through proper sleep. And sleep, there is another research I've pointed in my book, where they found that one night of bad sleep would reduce your insulin sensitivity by 30% the next day. So sleep has a very direct impact on your metabolic health and also managing your stress. So again, I have full protocols on how to improve the sleep quality as well in my book. But if you take care of these three big rocks: nutrition, activity, and your sleep stress, you would largely be find yourself in a very good metabolic state, basically.
Yeah, thank you for that. And coming back to, one small point that you made, as I always keep saying, and we all of us keep saying, that the D-Life community in itself is a huge randomized community data, and we do not wait for studies. It is very pertinent that researchers are now coming out. But Karan, if you go and read the forum, the D-Life forum itself, Anup has mentioned split walking. The entire protocol of split walking has been given since 2014.
Right.
The real pioneers, I would say, in every sense, when there was nobody around giving those directions of how much carbs should be there in a low carb diet, especially for a Indian vegetarian. 100-gram carbs came up then. Split walking, he has been talking since 2014, which is now coming into mainstream. He's always said there's no need to walk, mindlessly or early in the morning. It should be very strategic. And the entire
Exactly.
protocol of how many minutes after the first bite of the heaviest meal of the day should you start walking.
Yes.
So it is so pertinent, and it's a huge ocean of knowledge, as Karan said. It's many books and many courses combined into one. It take a lifetime to just go through forum cases and the gems that are there. So Karan, I think I'll before we go, anything that you would want to say about the man who made low carb possible in India, who made the course itself possible in India, and the entire protocol of 100-gram carbs, which is the gold standard now. Anup Singh, would you want to say something about him? We'll stay back to record a short clip for the course as well, but we'll end it
Yeah.
after this.
Look, I think Anup is one of those people who, who is building a new category. I mean, India, as you know, we love our carbohydrates, and we are basically a nation of carboholics, right? And it's not me or you saying this; the data points in that direction. This latest ICMR study very clearly points out that 60 to 70% of our calories are coming from carbohydrates. So here you have a man who has been talking about this for the longest, and he's been the pioneer in the low carb. In my opinion, I think he's the only one and the first one to actually bring this low carb thinking in India, right?
Correct.
So
Yes.
he's someone who's actually in a way creating a new category. And whenever you're creating a new category, you get a lot of pushback, you get a lot of because that's not the norm, right? People are you telling someone to not eat their roti and rice and bread, it's you're not going to get you're not going to be very popular, right? And I think and that's totally fine. And I think that's where you find that's where the greatness comes from, in my opinion, when you are able to take that contrarian view. And that contrarian view is not just his personal opinion, it's backed by deep research and science. And we are a metabolically sick nation. So the metabolic epidemic is truly of an epic proportion right now in India. I've briefly given you numbers, but cardiovascular deaths are like 27% of all deaths in India. Already diabetes capital of the world. And by the way, in 2050, 20% of our population will be above 60. So we are not just looking at a diabetes crisis, we are actually looking at dementia crisis very soon. So something has to be done, and someone needs to take a stand and talk sense. And I think that's a route for us. And I actually admire him for for doing that and sticking to it despite the conventional nutrition and dietitian world saying the opposite. He has always stuck very true to his beliefs, and he's only becoming more and more influential and more and more popular. And I think people are realizing that this is the right way to live. We were never designed to consume so much carbohydrates that we are consuming today, and that has partly led to this epidemic where we find ourselves in. So I think I deeply admire his audacity to actually be one of the first ones in India to first of all call this out, and then not just call it out but also come up with a solution and pioneer this entire 100 grams a day carb philosophy, which I'm a big fan of personally. Like I said, for the last 2 years I've been pretty much on this protocol, even though I'm not so much in counting, but I try to manage it somehow within that range without counting. I think once you get used to it, it gets easier, right? And so for example, I manage my carbohydrates by restricting my carbohydrates only in one single meal in a day. So I eat 3 meals, and two of my meals are carbohydrate free, and only one meal in a day is carbohydrate, and that too in a very small portion. So by default, I think I'm in that range of 100 grams or so,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
I've
You are
been.
in that range because, the beauty of 100-gram carbs, as Dr. Robert Sybers has said, is a big podcast out there on YouTube. He said, there's something called physiological insulin resistance. When you totally restrict carbs, that's not a good situation. And there's a whole scientific reason for that. And he
Right.
says that 100-gram carbs per day max just fits there where it's not spiking, anything at the same time. It's, clearing the glucose. And this entire protocol, that Anup has given fits very well into the narrative that Indian low carb is not the Western keto. So
No.
India is not a country that would anywhere or any time, any point of time will go beef, bacon, and eggs. And these have come and failed in India. The beauty of 100-gram carbs per day max is because of the fact that India is largely, as Karan said, a grain-based country, plant-based, diet eating country, and 100-gram carbs fits there because it gives a
Yeah.
number to how much carbs you can put on the plate, and it removes or eliminates any other doubt or any other confusion. And this is what made low carb and disease reversal possible for Indians. So I think with that, Karan, thank you so much. And
If I must add one thing, that's why it also I find it very practical because I'm also a fan of keto and carnivore to an extent, but they are very restrictive in nature, right? It's very
correct.
hard, especially in the Indian context. They're very restrictive, and I'm pretty sure if you're going to ask someone to turn carnivore or keto, the adherence rate would be super low, and this low carb approach, in my opinion, is very sustainable. At least I've been able to sustain it for last 2 years, and I think it's a far more sustainable way of maintaining your metabolic health than those super restrictive keto or carnivore diets, I feel.
Yeah, and our philosophy is that within 100-gram carbs per day max, you can have anything, even pure glucose. And
Exactly.
that's how Anup has been living. He has mithai, he has everything, but then he will keep in his mind that count of 100 grams and he'll stay within
Yeah.
that. And as he put out his blood report, recently, and every marker was fantastic. So I think he walks the talk now. 100-gram carbs per day max. Karan, thank you so much for coming here. And one last question that I asked you, even at your book launch at Crosswords, is there any plan of translating this book and getting it into other languages? That is one. And when is the second edition coming out, the second version
Ooh.
of this book coming out, part two?
Part two, I don't know. I think I still need to get over the part one. I think writing a book is a really really big endeavor. It took me, I think, 18 months to come out with this one, and so it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. I haven't thought of part two yet, but there are definitely plans to translate this book in other languages. I think Hindi is obviously a language that I and my publisher are looking into, and hopefully we will be able to come up with a Hindi version of Sick Nation very soon. Other languages, I'm not sure yet, but Hindi is definitely on cards.
Yeah, and Hindi is required and very well received also in the heartland. And I think you should go ahead with the Hindi. I will totally wait to read even
Yeah.
that. And viewers and audiences can find the link to Amazon also beneath in the show notes of this podcast. Also, a link to Karan's Instagram page, and everything else that you need to know about Karan and everything else will be in the show notes below. So, with that, Karan, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. And we are very proud to have you in the DLive community and very proud of your book. And we wish it all the success. May you become a writer and an author full time, and churning out books and more knowledge, and giving guidance to India that's metabolically lost. So wish you all the best, and your book is doing great. We wish it more sales and more popularity, and everything else. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Veera. You and Anup have been very kind, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.